The only people for me are the mad ones.
The world is filled with the boring and the barely conscious.
And misery loves company.
But we don't have to live this way.
Jessica and I are here to talk to those the system rejects, to radicals and thought criminals.
Ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but push the boundaries of acceptable discourse.
Those who stare reality in the face and dare it to be different.
History isn't made by the timid, and fun is not had by the perpetually afraid.
We are the mad ones.
So let's get to it.
Welcome to the Mad Ones. I'm your currently moonlighting as Brad Binkley on the Propaganda Report host as he fights a fever host, Cam Harless. And with me as always is your really prefers the word reposed over dead hostess, Miss Jessica Green.
Well, that is the preference of the Orthodox Church, of course. But my poor little Binkley has a fever.
He's got a fever and we have no cowbell.
No.
I'm not there with him and I don't have a cowbell, so I don't know how to help. But
My poor little Binkley buddy.
So he won't be here tonight, unfortunately.
Okay.
But joining us tonight is a guest who I believe has probably been on this show more than anybody else. Is that the X-Files theme I hear in the distance? If not, you should be, because coming in from the West Coast tonight is the destroyer of propaganda, the Bane of Bilderberg, the annihilator of the official narrative, the Batman of breaking the news they don't want you to hear, and a very good friend of ours and this show, Miss Monica Perez.
Hey guys, I think you're my most frequent guest also.
That's
always
true.
always covering us when we take a break, and our Propaganda Report listeners are huge fans of yours. Then hopefully they'll be here today.
Well, I've got to open up these comments and see.
Welcome, Propaganda Reporters, if you are new to the show. Cam is all over the internet. He just spreads it around. So,
well, I thought what I thought was funny is after I wrapped up today's show and edited and put it together, I don't know if you noticed this, Monica. Did you notice what I named the patron 45?
I didn't. I think I only saw the first one, but I have it right here in front of me. Let me see. No, I only see one thing.
Oh, I named it on Patreon, the one where we talk about Gavin Newsom and say the C word a lot.
Oh.
Okay. I was telling Cam that
I have a more sophisticated audience.
Yeah. I was telling Cam that my mom has a visceral reaction to the C word. Like, she physically recoils when she hears it. And I don't really have a word, I don't think. I mean, test me if you like. To that I physically recoil to, but I think that's because I had gay roommates in college, and the C word was a term of endearment. Like, that's just what you call each other. So yeah, I haven't found it yet, but if you guys want to test me and find out if there's a word that not on air,
that really does offend you.
Yeah. I should know what it is, like if it's out there. It's like if there's kryptonite, you should know.
Well, that word did not offend me at all. Unfortunately, I have a visitor. Get out of here. So it did not offend me at all. And although we did talk about it quite a bit, and we did have one context in which it offended me. I won't rehash the story, but you all can go listen. Patrons can go listen. But yeah, I forgot about that. And I do have sophisticated patrons who probably don't like it. But the compromise I've made is that the free show, the free 30, is clean. And I get to let my hair down in the patron 15. That's the compromise. And it's been satisfactory because what people were saying was, I can't share your show with people in my church because you curse so much. And I'm like, I never curse or swear. I only use vulgarity. But anyway, so we cleaned it up to make it shareable. And then the patron 15 is an entirely voluntary organization.
People from my church just sort of found out that I have a podcast because of the mic. They would see me in our Zoom calls with the mic and they said, "Oh, are you on the radio?" And I was like, "No, please don't listen to my show."
That's what I try to tell people. I tell my mother, my husband, I'm like, don't tell them. Don't tell them. Not a lot of people can handle it. And definitely not people you just happen to be sitting in a room with, You have to carefully curate the people you share the show with.
That's true.
Thankfully, we've only gotten good feedback from the church members so far. So
that's fantastic. Wow.
Yeah, it must not be too bad.
What church is that? That's kind of amazing.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't want to specifically tell the wide world where I go to church on Sunday, but
it's like a mainstream religion, right? We're not talking.
Yes, it is. It's the second largest Christian church. So yeah.
But what's fun about the show is since we've shifted away from political stuff, it does kind of open up the doors to a wider audience. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we still say the bad words, but it's been good because I've felt comfortable sharing episodes with my mother, and I even had her on the last one.
Really, you share episodes with your mother? I'm like some teleprompter. You share episodes with your mother? Did you clean up your act or what?
He did. The shelf behind him has a bunch of liquor on it, and the lights were turned off when his mom was on the show.
Oh, she can't even handle that you're an aficionado of fine whiskey?
I think he just didn't want his mom to see his liquor bottles. I don't think it had anything to do with Cindy.
My mom did, like when I told her I was doing the DPPs where we get together and have cocktails with the listeners and people chat. It's very fun. Always encouraging the drinking.
Well, God gave us wine to make our hearts glad, so I don't necessarily see a problem with it. Yeah.
Cause and solution to all of our problems.
Do you know what I almost said the other day? And I thought better of it just right before I said it, because I wasn't thinking. It wasn't like I'm going to be edgy, but I almost said Happy September 11th. Because of all of the flags I saw, my brain went, "Oh, it's one of these holidays," and I was like, "Oh no, this is a bad day."
Yeah. It's not a happy day. It does. That's interesting because it does serve the same purpose.
Yeah.
It saves it's like patriotism, and see, when I see that and I see the flag and everything, it feels very warmongery to me.
Yeah.
And they're like, don't you care about the victims? I'm like, well, yes, that's why I want to get the actual perpetrators.
Did you guys hear the story about the student in Washington University who went around campus removing all of the little tiny American flags that the student organization had placed along the pathway? And a student had walked up to him and filmed him doing this. And several times the campus police stopped him and made him go put the flags back. They put the flags back, but he kept repeating this behavior where he would go and take these little yard flags out of the ground. And I'm just kind of like, hey, that's more to remember the people that died than it is to like celebrate the 20 years of, perpetual war that occurred afterward. So maybe just like leave them there. But yeah, it was pretty weird. This kid could not be dissuaded from removing the flags.
Did he say why?
No, when the person went up to him and filmed him, they asked him, why are you doing that? And he didn't answer. He just had these trash bags full of little flags, and then he casually walked away. Like, okay, freak. So they called campus police on him. The police made him return the flags. And this happened 3 times, to the point where they told him, look, if you do this again, your next option is to go to jail, which apparently at that point he stopped stealing the little flags. But I'm not sure. It wasn't really clear why he was doing that. But I think a lot of people do associate any kind of mention of 9/11 with the warmongering that sort of came afterward, which is a reasonable connection to make. And it makes it hard for people who just want to remember the lives of the people, honor the lives of the people who were lost. Because clearly, 3,000 people lost under such horrific circumstances is something you do want to, have a memorial for. And then it gets really tied up with all this other baggage, from our government, Patriot Act, and go ahead.
If you read the Project for a New American Century, it's impossible to deny it's really the coincidence of something like that being desired in order to justify the exact war that came out of it. It's kind of like Event 201. It's like, could be a coincidence, but it could also be blueprints.
Mhm.
Yeah. I had a friend who is like the biggest conspiracy theorist I know. Like if you have a conspiracy theory, he's into it. And then he messaged me on the 9/11 anniversary and said, "You know what? I think it was just terrorists. I don't think the government did it." And I was like, "Why now? Why would you reverse your thinking on that now?" And I almost wonder if it's like it's become too mainstream to believe that 9/11 was an inside job. So his natural instinct is to go the other way of the mainstream thinking and say, you know what? No.
Conspiracist.
Yeah,
Hipster
that's
conspiracist,
interesting.
yeah.
Because the conspiracy then is his conspiracy theory is that the conspiracy theory was put out there to derail people. But that doesn't really, when you start not being able to figure out what's real and what's not real, I think you're not developing your discernment faculties, because ultimately, like, I've never come around on aliens. I'm not saying that I won't, and there is evidence, and I read some stuff, but I haven't come around on it yet. I really don't know.
Come
With
around
chemtrails,
for
like,
or against?
I am not a believer that in any alien narrative I've heard. I just don't. Anunnaki, or they run the government, or like interdimensional. I'm not saying it's not true. I really do not know. I'm not convinced. Nothing has convinced me. Whereas with chemtrails, I am convinced. And it took a really, really long time for me to realize it. But it's because out here it's so obvious. Like in LA, it's so obvious. I mean, I have pictures of them accidentally spraying it under the clouds so you can see that it's silver. I mean, I could show you a picture right this second. So, like, it's impossible. I can't unsee it. And every time I try to unsee it, they come and they do the same thing, which is push the clouds down so it doesn't rain. So I can predict what's happening. Then it happens and I see it and I take pictures of it and I tell people and they see it. Like, there's just too much evidence. And the same thing with 9/11. Like, if you watch Massimo Mazzucco's 5-hour documentary, The New Pearl Harbor, like, it's impossible to deny. Another one he did was American Moon. Same thing. It's like, you just cannot watch these photographers saying, like, look, I'm showing you that the light can't be from the sun. It has to be something else. And, that kind of thing. It's just, every time I have my doubts, I go back. Now, like the question of God, the existence of God, I read a thing of Tolstoy. Tolstoy was a great author. He wrote, he's one of my favorites, if not my absolute favorite. And he just decided at a certain point, he just decided unequivocally he believed in God. He was a spiritualist anarchist, and he decided not to write novels anymore. He started to just write like spiritual stuff, or just changed his whole life, because that's what happens, I guess, when you just firmly believe in God. But if you read some of his story along the way, he says, I would go through these phases where I would absolutely positively believe in God. It's so obvious. There could not be no other explanation. I feel his presence in my life. I see the order around me. And then I would alternate with, the idea of God is ridiculous. It's crazy. Like, how could you possibly think that you can be aware of your personhood after your brain is shriveled up 5,000 years? Like, how is it possible that you're going to have a conversation without a mouth? How is it possible that there's an entity that goes above and beyond? And there are things like that where I go, that itself, but I'm just saying, like, that is the process of discernment. And if you keep going, if he doesn't give up, if he keeps going, I think he will come around to the undeniable evidence that 9/11, just you cannot believe the official story. It's just not believable.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Like, my thing, I've never delved too deeply into the theories past what they gave us and saying I don't believe the official narrative. Like, I don't know what happened, but I don't believe this. I think that there was a lot more going. There's a lot of inconsistencies and coincidences, like the Rumsfeld talking about the how many $1 billion that they lost the day before it hit the Pentagon.
Yeah, I'm not super convinced by that one, but there's a lot, and I can tell you why, but there's a lot more.
Well,
going.
let's go through the thing, because I'm curious of your thoughts, because like I said, I haven't gone too deep. I've heard these different things, but first I just want to say, how the hell has it been 20 years already?
Oh, I know.
I was 12 years old when it happened.
Oh
And
God.
that is one of the things that I like. People talk about different generations, and they're like, oh, I'm a millennial. And I'm like, do you remember 9/11? Did it have an impact on your life? They're like, no. I'm like, you're not one of us. We are
So you made
separate.
me feel old by saying that 9/11 was 20 years ago, and then you made me feel older by saying that you were 12 when
I was
9/11
12 years
happened.
old. So that's an
God.
old thing that we used to do, like a couple years after, was, do you remember where you were on 9/11? And it is a fair question. Monica, do you
It's
remember?
our
You
generation's
obviously
challenger.
Yeah,
were older
I
than I
remember.
was, but
I
tell me where you
remember
were.
very distinctly. I was at my friend's house in Colorado, just visiting, and it was before I had kids. And we were supposed to go on a hike, and she was getting ready, and I was watching TV, and I said, wow, like there's a fire at the World Trade Center. And she was born and raised in New York, right near there. Like she was like near Lincoln Center. And she thought it was a joke. She was listening to it on the radio, and she thought these guys were just joking around. And I was like, no way. And then the building fell. And then a little while later, the other building fell, and we were just in shock. We canceled our hike. I mean, I don't know, I don't know what people were really thinking, but the first thing I did exactly what they want you to do, which is I started comparing it. I said, is this, because I knew like 50,000 people probably worked in and around those buildings, and that maybe they all died. And I started thinking, is this more like Vietnam or more like Pearl Harbor? I really thought it was more like Vietnam. So I looked up, and she had encyclopedias, and I looked up how many people died in Vietnam, and it was 50,000 people had died in combat in Vietnam, Americans.
Wow.
From what I could tell. And so I was making those comparisons, and it was only later that I realized that it was almost the exact same number as died in Pearl Harbor, which is exactly what they wanted. And when I read the report from Iron Mountain, it said like we do computer calculations on all of this stuff, including how much, like how many deaths, something like this vaguely, how many deaths it would take to change the position, a policy position, of the people. Like, so if people would vote one way, how many deaths would it take to make them vote a different way?
Wow.
And they said they could calculate how a policy could change the price of real estate in lower Manhattan, a tiny change in policy. So they were really, so when I saw that they used that number, that's what they were looking for. That was a while later, but I do remember that even though we didn't go on our hike, we did still have people over, and I made caipirinhas for the first time, which take longer to make than they take to drink, just so you know. But my very first thought was, they'll have to take care of this Palestine-Israel thing now. And my friend who I was with at her house, she's Jewish and from New York. And, I don't think she really had an opinion on it either way. But for me, like all I ever thought of about the Middle East was the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That's all I ever thought about the Middle East. I never thought anything else. And now that I've looked into it much more deeply, I realize that, as Gregory Harms, maybe I have the book handy, he wrote a really jarring book called The Introduction to the Israeli-Palestinian Conflict, but he wrote another book called Straight Power Concepts. So as much as you might think that it's about Israel and Palestine, it's actually just straight power concepts, the power of the Middle East, the power of the oil, the location, all of that. And so I've come to realize that even where I think that the Israeli-Palestinian thing in itself is like this big cover, it's a scapegoat, more or less. It's you don't have to dig any deeper than that, or Islamists hate freedom, stuff like that is even more shallow. But that's what I thought. Let me see if I can see those books.
So
I was
were you 17 or 18?
Me?
Yeah,
I was 16. I had not yet. Yeah, I was a junior in high school. and I was a bad kid, so I was skipping school that day. And we went over to my friend Robbie's house because he was the one who had, the stuff that
The
we
weed.
smoked when we skipped school. But he didn't want to wake up yet. So we flipped on the TV, and there was an accident had happened at the World Trade Center. And it was like, oh no, a plane hit the World Trade Center. What a terrible accident. How did this happen? I didn't even know planes could fly through that area. And we were watching live as the second plane came around. And I remember thinking in my head, oh, he better watch out or he'll hit the other building. And I watched that. As I thought that, I watched that plane slam directly into that building.
Wow.
And we didn't speak for minutes after that, just in complete shock, because I couldn't understand that it wasn't an accident. They had reported the first one was an accident. So I watched this happen a second time, and my brain could not process that someone had done this on purpose. And it took, a really long time for me to come to grips with that. And I remember calling my dad and telling him, I'm watching this on TV. I'm not at school. He said, stay where you are. I didn't get in trouble for skipping that day. He said, stay where you are. And then I called him after school, and I asked him, what's going on? What should I think? What should I do? And he said, well, you go to bed tonight, and when you wake up in the morning, either everything will be exactly the same or everything will be completely different. And looking back on him saying that 20 years after, he was right on both accounts. Like, in a way, nothing changed, and in a way, everything was different. And
you should say that. I finish and then I'll tell you what that makes.
No, yeah, that was pretty much it. But I remember, I'll never forget going up the stairs to my friends. I'm not going to say his name, but I went upstairs to wake him up, and I was like, "Hey, you should wake up. There's an accident in New York. Building's on fire." And he turns on his TV in his bedroom for a second. He looks at it and he goes, "Eh," and he shuts it off and he goes back to sleep. And that was his 9/11 reaction. And this was before the second plane hit. We just thought it was an accident at that time. So he's not like a total bastard or anything like that. But I'll never forget him being like, "Eh," and then shutting the TV back off. Like, okay, we'll go downstairs and wait for you to wake up.
That reminds me of that when Obama was elected. The South Park had an episode ready, probably for either Obama or McCain. So Obama and McCain were like teammates on something, so it didn't matter who won. But it had Ike saying, like, Ike was worried or something, and he said, "Oh, what are you worried about? You think the trees aren't going to grow? You think this is going to, nothing's going to happen?" Or everything's going to happen, everything's going to change. And then people got up the next day and like, it was still like the trees grew and all of that. Mm-hmm. And it totally made me think about, gotta get out of here, dog. It made me think that, yeah, but the trees were growing, but it was different. The world was different. And it's because it was kinetic or whatever. It was pregnant with what was going to happen. And it did change the world. I mean, I still think Obamacare was the tipping point because for the most part, once you have the half of the economy basically tied up with government money, then you'll never in a democracy ever vote for anything but more government spending, higher tax, because everybody's livelihood depends on it. So I feel like you think nothing changes because the trees are still growing, but it does change.
Like, we still had to go to school the next day. I worked at the mall. I still had to go to work. And I remember these stories coming out in the news about like, oh, terrorists might attack the Walmart in Roswell. And I'm like, why would Islamic terrorists attack the Walmart in Roswell? But people really thought that. They were scared. What do you mean?
No, you're right. I was 12 years old. Yeah. And I watched it happen. I think I saw some of it in homeroom because they turned on the TV. There were good teachers and bad teachers that day. Teachers who let us see what was going on and teachers who tried to shield us. I am glad that we had a couple teachers who let us see what was going on in that time. But I remember not really being super scared, just like I was a kid still. I was 12. I didn't have a whole dearth
Reference.
of emotion to go through. But I
Right.
remember being sad. I remember not believing it. But what was funny is we went through the whole school day. School wasn't canceled. We went through, they kept us in, and then I went to football practice that night. And I was in football practice. We practiced on a field that would switch between baseball and football. And so there were always dugouts on the field. And we were doing football practice and talking kids stuff. And then we saw a plane fly overhead.
Oh, yeah.
And every single one of those little boys ran into the dugout because we thought, oh, they're going to take a nosedive into the field and kill us.
Yep.
And so I remember, like, I guess it was the next day.
Plane.
I have no idea. I just remember
there were for a couple of days, there were no planes.
Yeah, 44,000 flights a day were canceled.
And that's why we were scared, is because they said they've grounded all the flights. Any of them that are still left out there just need to land. And so we saw that. We freaked out.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was the same day or the next day, but I remember being in the lunchroom and we were talking about how this is World War III. This is because, we saw the Day That Will Live in Infamy stuff. We saw all that. This is World War III. And I was a 12-year-old who was prepared to fight. I was going to go and take care of it, And
a lot of people signed up after that.
Bless.
I'm glad I was 12.
Yeah.
And not 18.
Yeah.
But that's what was crazy about that whole situation is like for millennials, it happened, like for everyone, it shifted things. Things changed. You couldn't swap plane tickets anymore. You had to take your shoes off. You had to do all this extra stuff. But it was right in the middle of our understanding of things. So we knew both before and after. And it was this bizarre thing that slowly became normal. And it's really
like COVID.
not.
Yeah,
Right.
I just
These
thinking
are
it.
wars. These are all wars. War used to be about, I don't even think about grabbing land so much as grabbing taxable land. And now I just feel like it's about social control, which is another thing you get from Report from Iron Mountain. And they were looking for a substitute, and the pandemic, pandemic is the substitute for war, but that was war. And when you think about it, it seems to me, when you talk about Biden taking ownership of the USA Patriot Act, saying he wrote it for OKC or World Trade Center 93 or whatever, like I just see all of those events. They had to just keep getting bigger and bigger because they could not get the Patriot Act passed. And I really feel like that was the main reason. Like the main reason was to put the last nail in the coffin of the Constitution. That really, and I have a listener, one of my JJs, who said they're probably drafting another Constitution right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are some people out there who are not going to get their Constitution passed, but who are creating their own constitutions.
The Constitutional Convention people? Yeah,
no,
for
I'm talking
sure.
about like radical leftists. Like
because
the people who will never be taken seriously, but they're all drafting their own constitutions. I've seen that. Okay,
well, I mean, the way it works these days is you just always compromise from where you are to where the other guy is. You never say, okay, well, I could go further to the right or whatever it is. But that's why when people advocate for this Constitutional Convention or Convention of States, I'm totally opposed to that. You are not going to draft. I mean, I prefer the Articles of Confederation. If you just want to swap them out, I'd be okay with that. But you are not drafting anything better than the letters on the page of the Constitution. See if you can get it enforced before you scrap it and think that by expanding or clarifying or whatever, you're going to get what that thing clearly says is yours to have and you are not getting now. So I'm not a fan of that.
Aren't we in kind of a conundrum where it's obvious that the Constitution didn't work? Like it was supposed to be a restriction of government powers, and it simply did not stop that from happening.
That was definitely my anarcho-capitalist epiphany, was that when I just thought it's like Lysander Spooner says, one thing or the other, but it still didn't work. And I started to think that actually, I was thinking about this for the Russian Revolution, the French Revolution, and the American Revolution, that all three of them were hijacked within 10 years. So what was fought for was the Articles of Confederation, which probably would have worked, except for that it couldn't stay. They couldn't keep it. So it was hijacked immediately, kind of just like, I feel like the French and Russian revolutions are clearer. What really happened is like they had the people fight the fight. They riled them up. They got them to tear down the old. And then they replaced it with whatever. And then they just replaced it with something completely different. And I feel like that's what they, big T, they are trying to get us to do now. When they put those, they are putting, I see that these like Boogaloo Boys and the Proud Boys, people are into it. Like Oath Keepers, I was a big fan of Oath Keepers, but all these organizations, they're either set up or they get infiltrated, or there's just like a moment when they get big enough that they get infiltrated. And the point is, when the problem is Klaus Schwab, they focus you on Nancy Pelosi. And if you, or, you know, and what we should have done was when Trump stepped out of line, you should have said, hey, just because there's an R next to his name doesn't mean that the emergency authorization or the emergency declaring an emergency here that's empowering all the governors, that's not okay. Someone has to stand up. Well, what could he do? It's like, well, whatever. But we really need to identify the problems and I think stick to the process. But what they're trying to get us to do is tear down the remnants of the constitutional government we have. And I think that the remnants are better than nothing at this point. I think we should keep it. I think we should defend it.
Do you think there's any way that balkanization or like the states splitting up into becoming their own individual countries, is there something like that possibly could happen?
You know, I would be fine. You know, of course, that would be a great thing. But look at Haiti. Look at Belarus. Like, they don't let you do that. Costa Rica tried to give anarcho-capitalists just a little piece of land. They said, hey, we're going to build a city. I'm sure they were going to pay them, give them 15% off the top or whatever. And Costa Rica agreed to it. I think it was Costa Rica. And then just the pressure from the world came down and the offer got rescinded. And I just feel like if you're dealing with a power that's so great that they can, I'm beginning to think they literally just sprayed a bioweapon on the entire earth. And one, like, if they could have made it more powerful, maybe they would have, but they don't really want that. They want to control it. So they put it, most of it is in the needles, but some of it was just sprayed. If they can do that, if they can kill every single one of the leaders, the African leaders or whatever, who they couldn't persuade, they can take everybody down. At a certain point, you just go Dave Chappelle and you're like, fuck it. You know, I can hold out as long as possible. How can you have an independent state when the world power that can control everything everywhere is not going to have it? Like, they just control everything, especially when there's going to be, you know, no more money. Like, how do you defend your borders against that, against a bioweapon being sprayed over you? Like, you'd have to, I'm not saying don't do it. I actually almost prefer the free county project over the free state project. Although I'm considering, like, in one of the few places I want to move, one of them is New Hampshire. I really, really am seriously considering it when I have a say in, you know, whatever, but we don't have to pay tuition. But
there is a certain group of people that the Free State Project has attracted who are a little nuts. I'm not going to sugarcoat that.
I don't know anything about the Free State Project. I'm not a joiner. I just think it would be nice to live in New Hampshire, and it would be cool to be one of the people who is on your side. But I think that if you can, I almost feel like this, you know, it's an impossible really question, but I feel like if you could take control of your county, like there's a county in California here where the sheriff just said, I'm not enforcing these laws. And he didn't, and they don't. And you can't really, I mean, they just got to eat that. But if it's a state, they can set you up. I don't know. I mean, I have seen
governors.
I am worried.
I have seen governors pushing back against some of this stuff. So it's like they'll be good on COVID, but they'll be garbage on like gun rights and stuff like that. So it's like, you know, you take your good with your bad. And I don't know if it's like a lesser of two evils kind of situation.
Is there anyone you think is legit? Because like DeSantis seems to me, when he oversaw that Miami condo collapse with a straight face, which I consider to have been a total setup, I just, you know, he's playing a role. I'm sure he's gonna run, and he has to have this track record. What do you think, Cam?
No, I was just going to say, I heard recently that he actually used to work at Guantanamo Bay.
Wow.
Which is like, wow.
So he knows the truth about 9/11. You know my theory about Guantanamo Bay.
No.
It's not that it's a bunch of terrorists. They just couldn't find the evidence, but they're so dangerous they can't let them out. It was probably a bunch of cooperators who know too much and they can't let them out. That's what I think, is that they're just they're political prisoners.
So you mentioned Haiti. Are you talking about the Haitian president being assassinated recently?
Yes.
Or something further back? Okay.
No. So in February, he arrested a bunch of people for a coup. There was all this leaked audio. They were working with, I think, the former ambassador to Haiti under Clinton, like the people who were doing the coup against him. And they like 8 people in Haiti died of COVID. One of them happened to be the third person who would have taken over. And the second person hadn't been sworn in yet. So there was a complete crisis of leadership there. And I think when it really wasn't working out, I think they can do earthquakes. William Engdahl said the first Haiti earthquake was about maybe natural resources or something. That's why Clinton, Bush, everybody was on the scene totally. This isn't the time for partisanship. Like, we need to be in Haiti now. I feel like they maybe did that earthquake too. And now I think the guy that they arrested was the guy, I believe, that Moise had selected as his successor. And now they're saying, oh, he's no good. He's got to go. I mean, they're just in there. Maybe it's a messy place to start out with, but the first thing I looked at when I saw that guy got killed was the vaccination rate in Haiti. And I found that it was 0.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy, the head of Tanzania, the head of Burundi, all these people that were completely opposed to the whole narrative, to the lockdowns and everything.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too, especially given the history of the U.S. government in Haiti and how they basically used the Marines and the military to set up shop for U.S. corporate interests, even though Haiti didn't want that. And we sent in Marines and forcibly made that happen. So it's like the U.S. has a really shady track record with how they deal with Haiti and the Haitian government.
I do know that they have a storied past, and it always makes me sad. Like, it was a libertarian example of like having somehow not been involved in writing the Haitian Constitution, and of course, Haiti is not a very well, like, not a success story. So anyone looking at that might say, well, we probably should have helped them. But as you mentioned earlier, the Constitution, is just worth the people who defend it.
Right.
One of the
looking
things
up the
that
name of the guy.
I'm always glad of is when there are people like with this last year and a half with COVID who immediately said, this is not good. I mean, I ran away from Pennsylvania very early on because I was like, this is not good. You said this is not good. A lot of people we know said this is not good. But, right after 9/11, I mean, there were a couple people who said something. But have you ever read the article by Harry Brown that he wrote the day after 9/11?
No. And I am a big fan of Harry Brown, and I would love to hear it. I remember voting for him.
Just real super quick before you guys go down the Harry Brown hole, if you guys are interested in learning a little, yeah, I did that on purpose. If you're ever bored one day and you want to look into what I was talking about with Haiti, Google Smedley Butler and include the term
"War is a racket."
War is a racket, gangster for capitalism, or the business plot, and you will find a deep rabbit hole to go down. But let's go down this Harry Brown hole.
Yes.
Gross. But he wrote an article on September 12th called When Will We Learn? And it's short, so I thought I'd just read the entirety of it so that we can kind of talk about that in September 11th from here. So he wrote, the terrorist attacks against America comprise a horrible tragedy, but they shouldn't be a surprise. It is well known that in war, the first casualty is truth, that during any war, truth is forsaken for propaganda. But sanity was a prior casualty. It was the loss of sanity that led to the war in the first place. Our foreign policy has been insane for decades. It was only a matter of time until Americans would have to suffer personally for it. It is a terrible tragedy of life that the innocent so often have to suffer for the sins of the guilty. When will we learn that we can't allow our politicians to bully the world without someone eventually bullying back? President Bush has authorized continued bombing of innocent people in Iraq. President Clinton bombed innocent people in the Sudan, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Serbia. President Bush Sr. invaded Iraq and Panama. President Reagan bombed innocent people in Libya, invaded Grenada, and on it goes. Do we think that the people who lost their families and friends and property and all that destruction would love America for what happened? When will we learn that violence always begets violence? Supposedly, Reagan bombed Libya to teach Muammar Gaddafi a lesson about terrorism. But shortly thereafter, a Pan Am plane was destroyed over Scotland, and our government tried to convince the world it was the Libyans who did it. When will we learn that teaching someone a lesson never teaches anything but resentment? That it only inspires the recipient to greater acts of defiance?
Yes.
How many times on Tuesday did we hear someone describe the terrorist attacks as cowardly acts? But as misguided and despicable as they were anything but cowardly. The people who committed them knowingly gave their lives for whatever stupid beliefs they held. But what about the American presidents who order bombings of innocent people, while the presidents remain completely insulated from any danger? What would you call their acts? When will we learn that forsaking truth and reason in the heat of battle almost always assures that we will lose the battle? And now, as night follows day, we will be told we must give up more of our freedoms to avenge what should never happened in the first place. When will we learn that it makes no sense to give up our freedoms in the name of freedom? What should be done? First of all, stop this hysteria. Stand back and ask how this could have happened. Ask how a prosperous country isolated by two oceans could have so embroiled itself in other people's business that someone would want to do us harm. Even sitting in the middle of Europe, Switzerland isn't beset by terrorist attacks because the Swiss mind their own business. Second, resolve that we won't let our leaders use this occasion to commit their own terrorist acts upon more innocent people, foreign and domestic, that will inspire more terrorist attacks in the future. Third, find a way with enforceable constitutional limits to prevent our leaders from ever provoking this kind of anger against America. There will be those who say this article is unpatriotic and un-American, that this is not a time to question our country or our leaders. When will we learn that without freedom and sanity, there is no reason to be patriotic?
I have something to say about that it really brought to mind, that article, while you were reading it. I was watching a lot of the footage of us leaving Afghanistan to the Taliban fighters. And something that I noticed about the Taliban fighters is that a lot of them are my age. I'm 38, which places them about 15, 16 years old when 9/11 happened. So how many of these Taliban fighters were created by the ministrations of the US government in their country? How many fathers of these young men were killed, or not so young anymore? Now we're all near 40, I guess. But how many fighters did you kill, and you made 10 more behind them? Mm-hmm. So, Harry Brown was absolutely right. He laid that out for us right there at 9/11, and our government proceeded to just plow through. And all of those exact predictions came true, because I watched all of these men, these Taliban fighters, who were nothing but teenagers when this whole thing started. And,
And there's some of them who were even younger than I am, who are 8, 19, 20. There are people who are in the Taliban now that were fighting, who were born after we invaded them. Yeah. Just like there are boys, for the last 2 years, there have been boys who were born before we went to war, who were in that war
after.
And he laid all of that out. Don't let them take our freedoms. They took our freedoms. Don't let them continue terror. We did a 20-year terror campaign in Afghanistan.
And now the Taliban is bigger and richer than it had ever had a chance of being before.
And the people who took over are the Haqqani network, mostly the guys they swapped for Bergdahl. And they were people who Charlie Wilson, I think he called Haqqani good personified, something like that. So it's my opinion that the whole Taliban thing is just a puppet regime of ours, not a puppet regime to make things peaceful. a puppet regime to make things agitated. I feel that I'm cautiously believing that about Iran too.
Well, they were wanting to give economic aid to Afghanistan immediately, who was run by the Taliban. Like there's arguments going on in the political sphere right now about sending the Taliban foreign aid.
Yeah.
Because they're going to say it'll keep the refugees in, but all they do is spread refugees and terrorism around the world when they break these countries up and they invade. So they'll give them the money to keep the refugees and terrorists in, but that just means they'll do what Egypt does, which gets military equipment to keep their own people in line. I don't think there's any dividing line in Egypt where we give them a lot of military money. Actually, it's not even money. It's like in kind. And I don't think there's any difference between their military and their police. I'm sure that's not true, but I think they certainly use that stuff against their own people, if I recall correctly.
And isn't it wild how many of them seem to know how to operate the specialized equipment? Things like Black Hawk helicopters. You're telling me the Taliban, these supposedly cave-dwelling desert people, all just know how to operate Black Hawk helicopters? Or
they
maybe
probably watch videos. That's what didn't the 9/11 guys?
Yeah,
the 9/11 guys didn't know how to.
You can learn anything on YouTube, really.
I think you probably can.
Yeah.
So, well, the official narrative of 9/11 is that we should never have listened to bin Laden about what he said and why he said he did it. That they did it because they hate America and they hate our freedoms. And that it was they don't mention that most of the hijackers were Saudi Arabian.
Right.
So the idea is just
weird.
They wanted to destroy America for what reason? Because they hate America. And then they ran the planes in and tried to do all of this. I mean, that's the gist, right? It was just very clear cut. The terrorists did a thing because they hate us. But that, a very simplistic way to put it, never made sense to me. Because why wouldn't we read their leader, our enemy's words about why he did it?
And of course, the reaction was just to double down on it anyway.
Do you know that the ancient Romans used to say that about the Gauls, that the Gauls are attacking us because they want our olive oil and they want our wine, and they don't like us because of our, we have riches that they don't have. Like that excuse is as old
and what was
as
the reason?
Time. That the Romans were invading their territory and Romanizing. They were basically knocking out the leaders of these tribes and putting Roman puppets in place of the actual tribe leaders. It's a story as old as time. It's no different than what has been happening now. And so Romans would come in, they would replace whatever king or chieftain was in charge of that area with someone who was compliant with Rome. And then the people would rise up and attack the Roman soldiers. And this was the evergreen excuse and the very thing that Caesar used to start the Gallic Wars, which massacred something like 1 million Gauls and drove these tribes people that had war with each other to join forces to fight Rome. And they got this close to doing it. Yeah. So
that's how you have France.
And that's how you have France. Yes.
That's interesting because I was reading Against the Grain. Maybe it goes back too far to be relevant, but Against the Grain by James C. Scott is a Yale professor, but an anarchist of sorts, I think. And he was saying that civilization, like cities, cannot survive on their own populations. They have to have migration from other places. And he was saying, like, when the barbarians came to Rome and stole stuff, they in return were taken as slaves a lot of times because they needed to replace the labor that civilization wears out the human population. I guess that, or they get destroyed by pandemics because they're too educated, but whatever. Maybe that's it. Maybe they're just giving the shot to the educated people because they're the threat. Sorry.
It's interesting that they say the placement of people who are resistant to the shot is on the opposite sides of the bell curve. So the people who are sort of like mid-grade, what Michael Malice calls midwits, they're all really supportive, the compliant people, the people who just go along to get along. All of these people want to get the shot. But if you have a very, very low education or a very, very high education, both of these groups are rejecting the implication that you should just obey and should just go along.
So that's how you have the instant third worlding of the first world, because you just take out the middle class. That's what you're talking about there. Because if you look at a map of the vaccinated, Africa is not vaccinated. And this would be the first time that a policy would be favoring the health and welfare of Africans. And the only thing I can think of is that once you, I mean, it's like when I used to work in a bank. The bank is a pyramid of the employment in the bank. An investment bank is a pyramid, or it was when I worked there. So you have like a jillion cheap, insanely hardworking associates or analysts who burn out. And then you have the associate class, which it starts to make more money. They're a little more sophisticated, whatever. Then you have the VP class.
Right.
Then you have the people who like sell, like the managing directors bring in the business. When there's a downturn, they take out the associates and the VPs because they're very expensive and they don't really have to run anything anymore. And they leave the plebes in place because they're cheap and they have some experience. And then when the business comes back, those guys are just like in the hopper. And so maybe we're like the VP class and we've got to go. I'm not going anywhere, but
well, sort of
it's contagious, unless the vaccine is contagious, which I actually think it is.
I plan to remain in the control group as long as humanly possible.
Only Amish.
Yeah. Just deciding on my own religious exemption here, whatever it takes. But one thing, just to bring it back.
I wrote a really great thing on that, but you're supposed to just keep it short. I have I'll send it to you if you want, like a 5-page thing.
Yeah.
The religion.
Please do. We'll link it in the description.
I do want to say, though, the way you just described investment banking is how I believe like the FBI, CIA, and all those bad actors work. It's like the ground floor are the people that you see, the agents for the most part.
They call them analysts,
probably, right? Yes.
They're true believers, right? They think they're doing the right thing, but they're not. They don't know what the people above them know, because they don't promote the people who would question things. They don't promote people who don't buy in completely. And so they only promote
like academia
up and up until they get to the top. And so there's a lot of planned incompetence at the bottom, and they want that because they don't want you looking at the top where the big stuff is going on. But that's just what I think happens.
I watched the
I think that's
I watched the FBI director and another guy give testimony before Congress today about the Larry Nassar thing, which, if you guys remember, is the U.S. gymnastics doctor that abused girls.
Yeah.
Right. So one thing I was noticing about them giving this testimony is every time they would ask these people, like, how are the FBI agents who were in charge of this investigation going to be held accountable? And at every turn, they say things along the lines of, well, they retired, so there's nothing disciplinary that we can do. But I'm very, very sorry that this happened to you, and we'll do our best not to let it happen again. Well, if there's no accountability for anybody, how are you going to prevent it from happening again? You just retire, you get your pension, and there's nothing disciplinary that can happen to you. And so I think what Cam's saying about there being like planned, what did you say?
Incompetence.
Planned incompetence. Like, oh, well, there are just enough of these like middle level or lower level people that if something goes really screwed up or we get caught doing what is in our culture to do, you can just retire. You take your pension with you and you retire, and you don't, our organization isn't held accountable. You're not held accountable. We'll just give a nice apology in front of Congress and that's it, and it's just, there's nothing to hold anybody to making any changes that would actually like protect people.
I've talked to a couple different people, and this is why I came into this thought of how it works. Who had worked with the government, and they're like, no, you don't understand. I've worked with these people. And he's not talking about the directors.
Yes.
He goes, I work with these people. They're incompetent. They can't do this. And I'm like,
yeah,
I know you're wrong.
Yeah, they're there. They're the duds. They're the duds that make you think that there's no minds. But a couple of things on that. Yes, I was annoyed that they identified these people like these once-in-a-lifetime rogue actors. Thank goodness that guy's out, because I've never met a guy who did anything but really care a lot about getting the truth. And maybe sometimes they cut corners because budgets are tight. But boy, oh boy, those guys really, they're just true blue. I mean, I don't believe that. I think there's a culture of whatever it is, if it's self-interest or politics or whatever it is. But I would like to see them have a congressional investigation like that about the two guys who went to jail for malfeasance in the investigation of Ross Ulbricht, who is serving 2 life sentences for nothing. And these guys, the fact that they were engaged in malfeasance during the investigation and were jailed for it was not allowed to be brought up in his trial. So here we have just an example no one's even supposed to know about gross malfeasance that really cost somebody his life. And they're trying, and that was a DEA agent and a Secret Service agent. So they're trying to tell us like, this is such an anomaly that we're having a Senate investigation because this one bad apple, this is how we do things in Washington.
Right. And if these are the people that we hear about, what happens to the people who have no power, who have no money, who are never going to have their story told? This is absolutely a culture. Why wouldn't it be? If it, they get caught doing it all the time. So how often must it happen that you get caught doing it all of the time? And people call. Go ahead.
No, finish.
Well,
but I was going to say people. Yes, you finish. Then I'll go.
Well, I was going to say people call you a conspiracy theorist, but do I theorize that people conspire behind closed doors? Yes, because they get caught doing it all of the time. That was all I was going to say.
There are entire laws against it. RICO is just about conspiracy. You can go to jail for simply conspiring without actually taking any further action. So what I was going to say about the FBI is when I was looking into some of the Mueller investigation thing, if you read that report, it was hilarious that the headlines and everything were like, oh my gosh, people were coming out and saying, I've never in all my years sitting in this with this gavel in my hand, I never saw anything as shocking, as outrageous. Blah, blah, blah. I read that whole entire thing. It was like hundreds of pages. And most of the citations, I would say 80% of the citations were one of two things. One, mainstream media newspaper articles they were referencing. And these, I think they're called 302 reports or 202 reports, which are FBI reports where they can have a conversation with you and go write it down on a piece of paper with that number on it months later and just recall what they think you said. You don't even know it exists. You can't rebut it. And they incorporated that as evidence. And when I read the Lori Loughlin, that was another 200 pages, that Varsity Blues thing, I knew when the stuff, even the stuff they were saying and the FBI affidavit didn't even really make her look guilty at all. Like there was a point in which the conspirator was saying, we hope the mom doesn't find out what we're up to. Like it's crazy. And on this, she has to plead. But the FBI, the actual evidence, like read the Mueller investigation report if you want to understand the level of rigor that is lauded across DC and the newsrooms in the country. And I do think that was an unusual case, but those reports where they don't have to have any kind of recording, it doesn't have to be in real time, it does not have to be witnessed, and you're not aware of it, is the backbone of a lot of these narratives that you're right. Like a little guy probably doesn't even know that.
Yeah. You never talk to these people without a lawyer present. And I wouldn't talk to these people without recording everything that's said. And, you don't trust them. Don't trust them when they say they have your best interests at heart. They want you to come down here and clear your name. We just want to understand what's happening. No, absolutely not. You never get in a room with these people and just casually chat with them. It's never a casual chat.
Well, and it's just amazing. It amazed me then. It amazes me now that you can be put into jail for lying to the FBI. Yes. How is that?
But they're allowed to lie to you.
Yep.
Right. But even
and that's like another thing that's kind of interesting.
I mean, I understand the not lying under oath thing, but why the hell would you have to do that with the FBI? How would that be a law? How does that make any sense?
Yeah, you better just not say anything ever. Jessica's right. Like, just keep it to yourself.
Oh yeah, don't talk to cops.
Do not talk to them. And if you for some reason are being compelled to do it, you go there with a lawyer. You never walk in there without a lawyer. And not the government lawyer that they're going to issue you. And this is the danger, because if you're a poor person, if you don't have resources, they zip you up really quick, really fast. Look at the Brendan Dassey.
Who is that?
Yeah.
The Making Dassey. A Murderer case, the young man who is very probably autistic. They basically, something. I don't know what was going on. Something was going on there, and they clearly cornered him into repeating the phrases that they were telling him to say. And I believe he's out now. But if it were not for that Netflix documentary, that kid would stay in jail. And how many others have they done it?
That's the thing. They do that one thing to make it look like you can get out. Thin Blue Line was a really good example, but there's a lot of examples. If you get into the wrongful executions, I used to think it never happened. Oh my gosh, does it happen? Holy cow. And if you're interested in how they do their thing, Ibrahim Todashev was an acquaintance, a friend, more or less, of Tamerlan Tsarnaev, who I'm pretty sure was a CIA agent and operative anyway. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that. The Boston Marathon bomber, supposed. And Ibrahim Todashev, I guess, kind of knew that about him, or knew something about him. And he was going back to Russia. He was a guy in Florida, and he was going back to Russia, and the FBI asked him to not go and to talk to him first. So they came to his house, and his friend, he was sitting with his friend. He's like, I am really scared. And he went into the house. They, unarmed, it was his own house. They shot him, I think, 6 or 8 times in the body and once in the crown of the head. And they said their story kept changing. He came at us with a broom. He came at us with a machete. I don't know. And his friend was interviewed, and I actually uploaded this somewhere. I have it somewhere, but maybe I'm better off not having it. Anyway, so his friend was interviewed by the local TV station, and he explained it. He was like, he was really scared, and he just wanted to leave, and like, there's nothing wrong with that guy, and I don't know how this happened, but it would have been good if he had gotten a lawyer and gone, but they talked him into not doing that, or if he had gotten on that flight to Russia.
Right.
His wife actually called me. I talked about it on the radio. She called me from Russia. I still have that interview too. Wow. But I asked her, I said, I think the little brother's dead. And she said that he wasn't, but so I was like, she might not have known every bit of the whole story. But anyway, it was an interesting time. But that guy was, look into the story. Yeesh.
A lot of the people that the U.S. government wants dead end up in Russia. And so it kind of like points a finger at why there's such a negative stereotype about Russia. And I don't think it's because their government gets up to the same shit that our government gets up to. I think it's because they have a lot of our political prisoners. Yeah. Right. Oh, they're basically the GDP of a state. They're like a really tiny country, but they have a lot of the political refugees of the United States. The people that our government wants dead are in Russia. And so they get painted a certain way in the press. Putin gets painted a certain way in the press, and it's madness.
So I do want to circle back to 9/11 real quick, because I had mentioned if you take the official narrative, what we were told was to not listen to our enemies and not listen to what Osama bin Laden said. I don't know if he ever said it on video, but there was a document that he allegedly wrote that talked about the reason he did it was because of the devastation he saw in Iraq from the sanctions of the United States and the war that was waged there, and all of this. He saw dead and dying children, and that was an impetus for him. But regardless of whether or not he wrote that, or if that's true or not, the fact that they looked us dead in the eye and told us not to listen to why our enemies were doing what they were doing is so disgusting to me.
So do you think that was generated as propaganda for non-Americans? Because sometimes, like, I wonder how something gets out, or I mean, because I don't think Osama bin Laden did 9/11. So why would he be saying he did? And why would be explaining why? And why, if he didn't, somebody else put that out there. Why did they put it out there? And I assume it out because the rest of the world isn't so stupid as to think that they did it because they hate us. They had to make a plausible explanation because people would just know it was Dick Cheney or whatever.
Right.
So, but here's what I want to know though. We know the official narrative, which I have never believed. But what do you think happened that day? What do you think led up to it? Please, if you can give us some, Monica, regale us your thoughts. Yeah, you, the other dark-haired woman. I thought about bringing on a third dark-haired woman just so I could be shouted over the whole time, but I decided we just wanted you this time.
Okay, all right. I mean, I think the Project for a New American Century, just that team, that gang. I mean, that's when you start thinking about like there are like I hate that the Q thing stole the chessboard analogy, but at a certain point in the chessboard, there are factions, and I guess the neocon faction planned it well in advance. Like I think they wired up the elevators, and I mean I believe it was a controlled demolition. And I think they gave heads up to a few people. I think obviously Larry Silverstein was in on it because he said that they were going to pull Building 7. I mean, who would say that in the way the insurance works? So I think they planned it in advance. I think they blew it up. I think Giuliani was in on it. And I don't know, like they got their war. What more is there? I don't even know. Like, did Mossad actually pull the trigger, or I don't know, like were there dancing Israelis? I think there were probably a lot of people in on it. Yeah, I think like the JFK thing where you can actually look into the JFK thing and say it was the French mob. You can say it was the Italian mob. You can say it was those guys in New Orleans who were on trial from Jim Garrison. You could say LBJ did it. There's a lot of Israel may have had a role in it. There's a lot of different ways you can look. Businessmen. If you watch the movie Executive Action, supposedly James Jesus Angleton, when he died, said that was the closest thing to the truth. This movie Executive Action, which I think Peter Crawford might have been in, who was JFK's brother-in-law. Anyway. So I feel like if you dug in all of that, all of it would be true. That it's an operation that probably involves a few people from a lot of organizations. So people who could make an organization move without being questioned as to why. Because think of like the money flows. The military our military was like, somebody would have noticed how totally vulnerable we were with all those drills at all times. Like somebody knew about that in the U.S. government. So I feel like it had to have been a conspiracy of a few people placed in a lot of different places. I mean, the Saudis were in on it. The Saudis actually did it, right? 15 Saudis actually did it.
Right. And we're still our allies. Saudi Arabia's bitch.
And we never, and I think they're England's bitch. So, England.
I mean, the U.S. is helping them just rape Yemen right now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Yemen, that's another thing. Yemen, if you read Michael Schroyer's book or listen to him talk about it, maybe it's not in the book, but he was the head of the Osama bin Laden unit, whatever. And he said there was just tons of chatter coming out of Yemen. Yemen's regime was totally fine with us until the regime that was responsible for all of that was run out of town. So like all those places, all those governments the question you're asking probably is who do I think is on top? The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, or the Rhodeses, of that triangle, who's on top? America, Wall Street, the city of London, or Tel Aviv. Like, I don't know.
And didn't also Netanyahu famously remark about how good all of this was for Israel?
Yeah. He did.
And I'm not saying he was necessarily a major player, but he didn't make any bones about the fact that it was just like beneficial to his foreign policy objectives.
Here's the thing about like the Mossad connection or whatever. I have this book on my shelf, not in arm's reach, but it's about Robert Maxwell and his involvement with Mossad. I think six Mossad chiefs went to his funeral. Whether his body's in the coffin or not, I don't know. But when you read books like that, or you see I've seen hidden video. I've seen video of Mossad assassins going out of and getting into elevators, like a man and a woman with baseball hats on. They get out, they get back in, and the person's killed inside. They are. I believe that it's not even a secret that they have assassination squads. They have specialties. They have, maybe compartmentalized.
Sure.
So it doesn't mean. I don't think that answers the question as to who at the top really set this in motion and who is responsible and who maybe didn't cooperate and died for resisting. I don't know.
Didn't they make a major Hollywood film with Eric Bana in it about how Mossad assassins are basically out there bringing justice to the world and basically painting that whole assassination thing as something we should be grateful for, and aren't these great heroes? Yeah.
I thought there was something like that out there.
It was called Munich.
Munich. There you go. Yeah. It was about the Olympic team that had been hijacked by Iran and had been killed. And that Golda Meir basically hired these guys, or these guys were part of Mossad, and went out and started capping off people that they believed to be involved with the plot. But this was put forward to the American public as, what a bunch of heroes. Isn't this a great action movie? Don't you feel vindicated to see these people being killed? And in some of the cases, even displayed in the movie, there are innocents who are being, kind of caught up in the crossfire here, and the explosions that they set off and the bullets that were flying. And
you'll love this.
They might have thrown somebody in the mix they just didn't like too, in that flurry of killing.
Why wouldn't you though?
You'll love this though, Monica. Do you know who directed that movie?
Munich. Who directed? I'm going to have to guess now. Who directed?
Steven.
When was it
Spielberg.
made? Oh, okay. It's a newer movie. I thought it was an older movie.
No, he didn't. He did.
I remember you mentioning Spielberg earlier this week or last week. I can't remember which. But you talk about how you don't like him, and I'm like, well, look at this. Spielberg.
Do not like him. So I guess, yeah, they try to glamorize it. I think that's probably true. But that's why I'm always really a stickler for evidence and trials and stuff. I mean, don't ever tell me, when I was defending Lori Loughlin or even Bill Cosby. I'm telling you why he did not, the Bill of Rights was violated in his trial. And it may be that this chick was extorting him on purpose. That is his Fifth Amendment right to have a witness in his favor was denied him. So we don't even know. He may actually have been innocent of the crime he was convicted of. In any case, it was overturned. But, and that is why the prosecutor wouldn't prosecute him in the first place, is because of that witness. But even the Lori Loughlin thing, I told people that she gave a charitable contribution and that she was being railroaded. And I mean, my audience at that time was basically all conservatives listening to me on the radio. And they would argue with me, she's guilty of sin. How can you defend her? What a piece of crap she is. And I was like, could you just read the FBI affidavit? Just read the section about her. It's 10 pages. That's all they had. And or basically all they had, and it did not paint that picture. And my point is just that it's they're doing this with the Parkland kid too. They're like, well, he shouldn't even get a public defender because he's so bad. I'm like, well, the reason they have public defenders in the Constitution is that the government can easily paint you as bad and you're not. And if you don't have the money to defend yourself, then they can do that not only to people who are bad, but to people who aren't bad. Or they can set up circumstantial evidence to make it pretty clear, to railroad you and stuff. It's got to be jury trial. I hate plea bargains. I want a jury trial. I want evidence. I want process.
This is something that David Gornowski talks about with mimetic theory and how they basically set people up as sacrificial lambs. And Cam has talked about this too, where they'll often pick someone who's really bad or really ugly or just really easy to hate.
I got it from Monica.
It's a sacrificial wolf. Okay. It's a sacrificial wolf.
Yeah. So it's like
you take the bad people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you feel
I didn't know that was in the mimetic stuff.
Yeah, David Gornowski talks about this. He talks about the way scapegoats are set up for us because we have this natural inclination towards sacrifices. And it's just sort of like something that's ingrained in our nature as human beings. And so every once in a while, we'll need a sacrifice because the world is so filled with injustice, much of it perpetuated by our own governments, that they'll throw these sacrificial lambs out there, these scapegoats, so that we can see them sacrificed. And when we see a sacrifice take place, it gives us a sense of justice. So this is the reason when you see these photographs of people around a tree where someone has been lynched, a lot of the people will be smiling, even though this is a really horrible thing. Like a person is hanging and you shouldn't even be smiling. Everyone there feels a sense of justice. So we're looking at it with the eyes, looking back in history, saying, oh, isn't this a terrible thing? But to them at the time, they said, this is a bad person. And we strung them up. And didn't we do good? And you feel it not only do you get to get rid of the people you don't like, but you get to give everybody around a sense of that there is justice. And it's false. It's all fake. It's an idol. It's not real. But they do that. And it's to give everybody that little warm feeling of didn't we do good?
I did hear that the scapegoat process, I think somebody told me, I think it was Bellamy Fitzpatrick told me it was maybe the most powerful thing that like, communal ritual, like it had the most power. So that's really interesting. And if it is so powerful, who is that person now? I mean, Andrew Cuomo just wasn't enough. Like someone's got to go. Will it be Fauci? Somebody's got to go. If that's really the thing, if it's that powerful, and we just had the Newsom recall, I didn't think he was going to go. He's old money.
Well, we do it to entire populations. So like the entire population of Iraq was used as a scapegoat. The entire population of Afghanistan was a sacrificial goat to our need for revenge. Because I remember directly after 9/11, people talking about turn that place into a parking lot. Well, Afghanistan didn't even have anything to do with 9/11, but we had that sense of the need for blood. And it is ingrained in human nature. I mean, back thousands of years ago, we would sacrifice animals. And this was to the gods. Like we needed to please the gods. So we would kill animals.
The 200 goats floating down the Chattahoochee recently.
Did you hear about that?
Headless goats.
Word. Yes. Okay. I'm glad someone else knows
it's normally this. 30. It's normally like 30, but this time, and I figured it was because things were so bad that they were just trying to, up the magic.
So there is a significant both Santeria and hoodoo voodoo population. And man, I don't like talking about hoodoo or voodoo because there's something real creepy about that stuff. But so goats, the sacrifice of animals is like part of, the religious practice. The part of doing these spells is the blood of these animals.
I didn't know there were a lot of them in Atlanta. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
What's that? What is the origin of that community? How come that community is so large?
So I'm not entirely sure. I was reading an article about it, and they did mention what countries. It's a variety of countries. Yeah,
and West Africa.
So it's a combination of like old religion from Africa, kind of mixing in with slave culture that had been brought to the Americas, right. Okay. And it was kind of like this mix of things. And that's hoodoo and voodoo comes from Haiti, which is that connection. And then I think
this one comes
Santeria. Yeah, Santeria has mixture with Catholicism, but there's animal sacrifice in both. And so the goats are thought to come from some sort of religious practice sacrifice. And what do you do with these bodies, Or is there part of the ritual that requires them to be placed into flowing water or something of that nature? Yeah. So, I haven't been tubing this year because I've heard a lot of people are finding goat bodies, and I just don't think I can handle that. So,
Can you imagine?
That is
Can you imagine?
unsanitary.
well, the
Maybe they are.
E. coli.
Yeah. Oh,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
somebody, a JB, a listener of mine from Atlanta, said she thought maybe they were just trying to drive people away from the river. You know, they really don't want us to have access to nature or anything that has value. If rivers have value.
The E. coli count was like off the charts this year too.
Oh, probably because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would imagine that like the dumping of animal bodies directly into the water does have something to do with driving.
Bring it down.
Yeah.
Let me ask you 2 questions. One's quick. Do you think Steven Spielberg is Mossad?
Oh, I never considered that question. I have no opinion on that.
Because now that
Like,
I know
not
that he
because
did that
I
movie,
just
it's
never even
curious.
thought about it. Well, maybe he
Curious.
just wants to keep them on his good side.
Maybe. And then the second one was, since we mentioned Santeria, we talked about Paulo on your show the other day, and about the Naganga, the what is it? What do they call the cauldron that they have? They fill with sticks and human bones and other animal parts.
Oh yeah,
and it enslaves the spirit of
yeah.
the person whose bones it is, and they have their own little demon helper.
Serpent in the Rainbow. We were talking about this.
Oh, interesting.
Do you guys remember that movie? It came out in like the late 80s.
I remember hearing about it, but I don't remember seeing it. Was it good?
It was really good. It's based on a true story. I'm sorry, I'm running over your thing, Cam. It is related though.
Yeah. I was just you're good. I was just gonna ask her. There are people out there who believe that 9/11 and the sacrifice was a dark black mass type sacrifice. Do you think that there's darkness in that way?
I thought of that. I observed that. And then I Googled it and found that there's like books written about it. I probably have some. I should have pulled out my books on the subject ahead of time. But it looked to me like it had to be. Like I just puzzled and puzzled and puzzled. Like, how could you do that? And I thought, I mean, a ritual in both, for both purposes that a ritual would serve. One would be to terrify the congregation or whatever. Mm-hmm. And the other might be to truly invoke magic. So I don't know if I mean, at that level of like, it's just downright evil to do something like that. I can't imagine anything on earth getting somebody, even Dick Cheney, to do something that crazy, that bad, to be, it goes to Brzezinski saying we would have an elite that is not bound by our ethics. But there was,
This is what I think power and money does have an effect, like a ratcheting up effect. Because if you have every need and every want you've ever had met instantaneously by a swarm of worshipers, where else would you have to go? Like you would have to ratchet things up.
The law of diminishing returns.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Human hunting parties. But this is the only thing I could think of that could get them to rationalize it. And all it made me think was, well, I just read a book called Hidden History, The Secret Origins of World War I. And these guys do not care at all about the pain and suffering they impart on the masses. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm just sick about this COVID thing. I mean, people, what they have done to people's lives with these vaccine mandates. I mean, hopes and dreams, lives, works. People have to either take their chances or abandon everything, live on the outskirts. It's really sick what they're doing. Sick. But the way I felt like they might have justified the 9/11 thing was saying, okay, 3,000 people died. We drafted those people. They were soldiers who were drafted because we need to do what we know is secretly right without any evidence or trial or declaration of war. See, that's where it gets so bad to say, I killed this person because I knew he was guilty. I couldn't prove it. I didn't have time. I didn't have evidence, but I know they're guilty. No, it does not work that way. So what they said was we had to make something up, make it look like these guys did something that looked like what we know is the physical manifestation of how bad they are, of the true danger they pose to us. And we have to tell you, we have to prove that danger to you before they prove it to you even worse. And that even worse never would happen. We are totally, just look at the FAA. You can say whatever you want about them, but they do get it done. They do get it done. So, there's, I hate to even utter it because like they'll be like, we can't, this perfect record we have of flight safety gives the lie to the incompetence canard that we're not incompetent, that the incompetence is designed into the system. So maybe they just said they justified it, by saying they all wars are started with false flags, and this one, these people were drafted, and false flags are necessary to vet a true enemy. But
there's
I'm not buying it.
There's a lot in the popular culture too that sort of lionizes or celebrates extrajudicial killings, and just the idea of the renegade cop who plays by his own rules. Jack Ryan, the character of Jack Ryan, who basically skirts international law in order to get the bad guy. All of these things. Jack Bauer, who would torture his wife's
Jason
brother
Bourne.
in one episode. Yeah,
Jason
and all of
Bourne.
these, right, all of these characters who become like our popular culture heroes because they skirt authority, they skirt any kind of limitation on their own power, and we're supposed to be grateful.
And they're good,
and they're always good. And these people would never, have bad actors that might operate under
or
the
mistake.
same kind of. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
How do they, they're these world-class assassins, but they're also the best information gatherers and judges and most level-headed people. But I wanted something that you said earlier, I wanted to comment on, Cam, on the topic about the Harry Brown article. Harry Brown said a few things that I wanted to expand on. So one is, I've always had this sense that the way I phrased it was like exceptionalism is destabilizing. That I don't know if everybody's heard me say this, but American exceptionalism is not American extraordinariness. It's an exception to certain foundational laws, the Law of Nations by Vattel, which is really wrong because the Constitution, the number one book that was used reference in drafting the Constitution, from what I read in John Coleman's Committee of 300, for what it's worth, I think it's probably worth something, is Vattel's Law of Nations. So, and that, one of the fundamental principles in that is this idea of sovereignty. And when we violate the sovereignty of other countries, and this is not just theoretical, this is actually what happened. I've had people call me from African countries, Middle Eastern countries. One specifically said about how they had so much hope in the 60s with JFK and everything, and then just the legs were kicked out of that. I heard Gaddafi's son talk to Kucinich and say, I don't know what's going on here, but surely America can help correct the record. We're not scalping people. We're not doing any of these things. These are outsiders. Little did he know it was undoubtedly us. So this idea of American exceptionalism is the destabilizing force in the Middle East, which I think was a point that Harry Brown was bringing up. Another thing is this idea. I was raised 100%. My father always said, bombing is cowardly. You must never. We would watch mob movies and they'd blow up somebody's car, and he would say, that is, if you got to kill somebody, you shoot them in the face. Like, that's what you do.
You look them in the eye.
Face. Yeah. He said, bombing is cowardly. Hated bombers. Always taught us that was no respect for that. And as far as I think Harry Brown's reference to a place surrounded by two oceans seems like a callback to George Washington's farewell speech. So that in my opinion, the only legitimate alliances are continental ones. So I believe that the founders mostly were continentalists. So you make your alliances with Canada and Mexico and you leave it at that. And you make sure that those borders are strong and you leave it at that. And your friend Smedley Butler, I believe it was him who asked for an amendment to the Constitution saying that U.S. forces could not leave more than 750 miles offshore. I think that was one of the ones he wanted.
How different the world would be now if that had, yeah.
Yeah, we act like there's bad in the world and we have to overstep our bounds. But think about it. We have had half the world's defense budget has been spent by the U.S. military for how long? So how is anyone, even if all the other countries were our enemies and allied with each other, they wouldn't have the organization. They would have 200 different defense budgets. They could never produce the kind of defensive weapons that we have produced. And so how do they have them? How do they have cyber weapons? Because we give them to them. We sell them to them. We drop them out of the air on top of them, let them reverse engineer it. We are responsible for all of it. And if we had minded our own business, the defense budget would be a fraction of what it is. And that stuff wouldn't even be out there. I believe that I think Oppenheimer gave Russia the bomb just so the military industrial complex would have something to have wartime spending during peacetime.
It's every government program is self-perpetuating too. So it's like if you have a program against poverty, it creates more poverty. If you have a defense program, it's to create more danger around the world so that it can perpetuate itself.
There's this quote from John Quincy Adams that I just remembered that talks about this idea of allyship from the United States. And so he's talking about America. He says, wherever the standard of freedom and independence has been or shall be unfurled, there will her heart, her benedictions and prayers be. But she goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy. She is the well-wisher to the freedom and independence of all. She is the champion and vindicator only of her own. She will commend the general cause by the countenance of her voice and the benignant sympathy of her example. She well knows that by once enlisting under other banners than her own, were they even the banners of foreign independence, she would involve herself beyond the power of extrication. In all the wars of interest and intrigue, of individual avarice, envy, and ambition, which assume the colors and usurp the standard of freedom, the fundamental maxims of her policy would insensibly change from liberty to force. She might become the dictatress of the world. She would no longer be the ruler of her own spirit.
That last line.
Prescient.
Yeah.
Son of the second president. What was he, the fifth president?
Yeah, something like that. I have a book on my shelf. It used to be sitting
Who's
here.
The fourth?
Fourth or fifth? One of the two.
Who's the fourth?
I don't know. Let me
He must be the fourth because it was
fail the quiz.
Washington, Adams, Jefferson. Was there somebody in between?
Let's find out together.
I knew this in fourth grade. James Madison.
I never learned.
Madison.
The president's good girl. She beat you with her brain.
No, I have a second screen. I have a book on my shelf called Hunting the Jackal, and it's by a guy named Billy Waugh, who was a assassin for the U.S. government. He has a plaque and award on his wall that just says, "In gratitude to the assassin," and it came from our government to him. And so I got this book because the guy has a pretty interesting history, especially in the Middle East. And the very, very first chapter of that book has him strangling with his hands a woman to death in a village in China, or rather in Vietnam. And it was to keep her from alerting Chinese soldiers who were just over the ridge. And she had witnessed them kill her husband, and she was making a lot of noise, and he strangled her to death with his two bare hands. And after I read this paragraph, which sickened me so, he just basically summed it up with, "I didn't want to do it, but hey, that's war." And these people will justify any monstrous act, including strangling a completely innocent woman who's upset at watching her husband get killed moments ago because, hey, it's war. And so that is war.
That is war.
Yeah.
That's why we don't like it.
Yeah. So there's no bottom. There's no bottom. And I couldn't finish reading the book. I shut the book. I shut it. I put it on the shelf and I couldn't read anymore.
Because war is the health of the state, or war was the health of the state. Now sickness is the health of the state.
Yeah.
It's information wars.
Yeah. No, it's just the pandemic is the war now.
Yeah. But that's all an information war.
Oh yeah. Without the screen, there is no.
If that's the war, the people are the enemy combatants. And how many innocent women would the state be willing to strangle with its bare hands to see the endeavors and the outcomes that it wishes to see? And I don't think there's a bottom. I don't think these people have any bottom. So,
but let me ask, because with that level of depth and sadness, I think that we might want to talk about.
Well, it's a 9/11 show.
Yeah,
shift gears a little bit.
We've been through a lot over the last 20 years, and then this year we had 1/6, which they said was worse than 9/11 last week. Multiple people said that. George W. Bush got on stage and said that the people from 1/6 and people like that are born of the same foul spirit as those who ran planes into the Twin Towers.
Well, that's yeah.
And George Bush
would know that foul spirit.
And it's just a week later. There's allegedly a gathering that's going to be for the justice for Ashley Babbitt. Happens to be a week after 9/11. Just happens to be, and they're putting up fences. They're saying they're prepping for something. I hope nothing.
That shit glows in the dark.
September 18th.
I'll say it right now. Everything about that glows in the dark.
I'm saying it was that the closeness to September 11th. W saying what he did. These other people saying what they did. That's narrative. Like that's written. But we have hope. I mean, right? I mean, I've spent a lot of time with you and Binkley going into the trenches of news and talking about these different things, but we're always laughing. We're always finding the joy. I mean, I one compliment I got from being on your show from one of your listeners was that they just really love my disposition. And it's because I can talk about the most horrible things in the world, and sometimes I'll get kind of choked up, but I also laugh at the worst things because of the absurdity of it.
Your customer service training though gets you to like bear up. You have that voice, that mellifluous. What does mellifluous mean? But you just I feel like you've got a lot of emotional control. So even if you were shaken up, that you would not show it. But I just, if I thought about it too hard, I would not be able to laugh. I look at it like a rational human being, and I'd laugh at the absurdity of the contradictions of the, it's very absurd, but there is a lot of genuine pain and destruction that these people have wrought. And I feel like I can only think that this is what it's like to be in a war. It is what it's like to be in a war. And maybe all wars are like this. They're really lately anyway, perpetrated against the people of the country, your own people. It's like democide. Maybe war was always a form of democide. Even governments kill their own people, but governments kill their own people by sending them to war, which doesn't even count in those numbers of hundreds of millions. However, there are so many people who see the truth now, though. I mean,
more than ever.
Yeah. Like I feel like something's got to give. I just feel like something's got to give. Maybe the battle lines are drawn and we're on our side. And I don't know if we have to actually fight or we can just move south. I don't know. I don't know the right answer. So I want to. I'm
It's
still
good
thinking
here.
Texas. I like the New Hampshire idea, but it's a little close to Canada.
So, just real quick, mellifluence means the quality of sounding mellifluous. That is the quality of sounding very smooth or pleasant. So you
There
were dead
you
on the
are.
money. Yeah.
That is you, Cam.
Yeah.
Mellifluous.
Thank you.
There's
It
a
was
very
such a-
famous. Yeah, good word.
It was such a good word that I had to look it up because
I got it from an old Howard Stern clip. So if you look up that word and look up Howard Stern, you will hear the funny clip.
Okay.
Someone wished
I will
Robin
say,
a mellifluous Easter.
I don't know.
I was like,
I don't know if I've mentioned. Did I mention Norm passing at the beginning of this, or did I?
I'm not sure. I
that
don't
was in
think
the
you
show
did.
today. No, that was in our show.
Well, let me just say one, because you mentioned Howard Stern. One, rest in peace, Norm Macdonald. You're a treasure. Read his memoir. I'll put it in the show notes if you want to buy it. But I will never forgive Howard Stern for the time he took Norm Macdonald essentially to task. I can't remember the specifics of it off the top of my head, but there was one time he essentially made Norm apologize for not going along with the establishment. And you know Howard Stern in the next, if he hasn't already, is going to be giving all these kind words to Norm Macdonald. But before Norm Macdonald passed away, he spent time trying to beat him into compliance. And so Howard Stern can shove it up his ass.
A lot of people did. That Norm was canceled by the establishment, and they really tried to ruin the career that he had built over the last how many decades.
Why?
And now that he's died, because he didn't toe the line. He was, he was never outwardly political, but he didn't go all the way balls to the wall left when everybody else in the culture was doing that. Also, he had some Christian leanings, just all of the things that make people not popular in the culture now. He just didn't toe the line. And so they ruined him or tried to ruin him as a result of that. And now that he's died, they're going to do this thing that they always do when people die. And they put him up on an altar and surround them with flowers and flames and tell everybody how great they were and how great the friendship they had with them was, when the truth is the establishment tried to bring him down. And it's like
with Ronald Reagan, they did all that too. But I'll say for Norm Macdonald exactly what I said for Donald Rumsfeld. I hope he is getting his just desserts.
Yeah, I said to Cam before we started the show, a lot of Norm's Christian leaning tweets are coming out now that he's died, and people are kind of bringing them back up. I said it's kind of awesome to know I'll get to see Norm Macdonald again at some point. So
yeah. Now that they know that's all we got, and maybe there'll be an amazing religious resurgence of a profound and good nature rather than exploitive, which like everything good gets exploited. But maybe people facing down death because that's all that's being shoved down our throat night and day. Maybe they'll realize, like, maybe I don't have as much time as I thought I had, and I ought to get a little churching up. Of course, they closed the churches, but we've got to get that back on track. Hopefully, we'll live long enough to see them open again in full. They're pretty open here, but lost a lot.
I heard someone asking a priest recently, like, aren't you scared that they're going to bring the lockdowns again, that they're going to shut us down again? And he said, oh, no, I'm not worried about that. Do you know how good the church is at surviving persecution? If we have to go back down to the catacombs, that's where we'll go.
But they didn't.
And I was like,
but they didn't.
Many did. Do you remember that Polish Canadian pastor screaming at the Canadian authorities, out Nazi, out Nazi?
No, do you know that? I asked my priest to do it, and he said no.
Many won't. Many pastors are of the world, but are in the world. Some of them are of the world, and some of them are just in the world.
Yeah, and we do have a new pastor who did have enough, and he stopped. He did stop, and now everybody just goes to mass. I guess they realize, like, that's that. So
I can't tell you how much crap I got over a year ago when I said, people, if your church is closed on Easter, spend time with your family. have a church service at your house, do something, celebrate this. And there were people all over my Facebook, which is part of the reason why I don't get on Facebook anymore, who were just angry at me for telling people to spend time with their family.
Imagine what a criminal thing.
But what kind of a church closes? I mean, that's what they did. That's what the Catholic churches did. Time to go.
They're
on Easter, in the face of death. If you're going to leave it, they should leave them open. Open a funeral parlor next door and a church over here, because that's the only thing that you need to keep open. You don't need the bars. You don't need the gyms. You don't need the schools. You don't need the government offices. But you need the churches if you've got that. If you've got people afraid of death, it's just crazy. Or facing death.
I think the first time around they had a lot of success with it because nobody knew what was happening. People were generally scared that this might be something really bad. They don't want to put their older people in danger. So there was a lot of like genuine concern that went into that. I think them trying to do a second round of that, they'll find a lot more resistance than they did the first time.
People are going to be way sicker this time, though. People are way, way sicker this time. This time, there is reason for, I mean, I'm not suggesting it, but I didn't know anybody who was sick before the vaccines rolled out. And now people are getting sick like crazy. I got sick I think I got it from somebody who had the vaccine. No, back then we saw it. Anybody who wasn't totally believed every damn thing that comes out of the mainstream media could have had a mind to say, like, what the hell? Don't get me mad. Let's get back to where we were happy. What'd you break, Cam? Leave us with that. What'd you break? Because you're obviously gone too far.
What's it, Cam?
It was a bottle of ibuprofen. I'm not sure what fell off of my desk.
When you started with the bottle, I would think it was anything but ibuprofen, given what's really going on in that room of yours.
Even during the persecutions of Christians in the Roman Empire, the Diocletian persecutions, there were martyrs. Yes, people who died for their faith, but not everybody was a martyr. Some of them took the church underground. And those people kept the flame alive too. So you need a variety of people. Some people are going to obey, yes. Some people will take it underground. Some people will have church in their home. Some people will resist the authorities. And so all of this draws people back, because when I saw, his name was Arthur Pawlowski, the guy in Canada who was screaming at the police officers to get out of his church. And they helplessly eventually threw their hands up and walked out. That flame inspired me. I said, I'm going to church. I'm going back to church. You better believe. And so it's not purposeless. It does have an effect on people.
Can Roman Catholics convert to Russian Orthodox? Is that okay?
Yeah,
by the Catholic Church?
So yeah,
but
I became
Russian Orthodox. Don't let you become Roman Catholic.
So I converted to Orthodoxy. And technically I was baptized Orthodox, so that has a little bit to do with why it was such an easy transition for me. But there is such a thing called economia in the church, which is if you've been baptized Roman Catholic, you don't need another baptism. We consider that
I want another baptism. Baptism's the best. It wipes it all away.
So that's a Protestant thing too, that
it's better than confession.
You can get as many as you like if to go into any new church, and they'll rebaptize you. But as far as the Orthodox go, it's the maintenance of the house, economia. If you've been baptized already by the Roman Catholic Church, we consider that sacrament to be legitimate. And you can convert and become an Orthodox. It's A-okay.
But does the Roman Church think that I'm an apostate?
No, yeah. So we're in schism, the Orthodox, and we call it the Latin Church because technically we're all Catholic.
Yes.
But yeah, the Roman Catholics have some pretty big attitude about that.
I thought you guys said that someone told me that I could go to Mass and confession or Mass and communion at a Roman church, at a Russian church, but that Russians don't think it's valid to go to Mass and communion in a Roman church.
No, they don't. And I would not, if my only option was to go to a Catholic church or to pray at home, the better option would be for me to pray at home. Right. Yeah, I wouldn't go and commune in a Catholic church.
So my uncle was a priest who was trained in the Eastern Rite, but I do not think that was full Russian. I think that's more like Greek.
Right. So there's different things too. It's like there's Russian, there's Greeks, there's Antiochian, which I'm an Antiochian. So we're all Eastern Orthodox, technically Eastern Catholic Orthodox. But so we're technically the same religion, but there's cultural differences. So like there'll be traditional differences in the way that we do things. So, but you know, I could go commune in a Russian church. I could go commune in a Greek church. The Russians and Greeks could come to my Antiochian church and we would commune them.
Transubstantiation, like when you take communion, it is the body of Christ?
It is the blood and the body. And when they are preparing that, there's a whole divine liturgy that goes along with creating this event. It's not just a memorial. It is genuinely happening. Yeah.
One of my listeners is a priest, and he's going to answer all these questions. And then I can tell people later.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for allowing this conversation, because I know he's going to listen. I'm going to get like a 3-page thing, which is what I'm after. So bring it.
I am only a catechumen, which means I have not yet been confirmed as an Orthodox, but I'm having my chrismation, my confirmation in about a month from now. So that's a pretty... Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Sacrament. You don't get a lot of sacraments in the world. Sacraments are awesome. No, and I hardly get it at all because I'm a celiac and they stopped fucking wine. Pisses me off.
Oh.
So
well, come on over to the Orthodox Church.
I know, the Russians
basically the same.
The pandemic much better. All right, well, we'll see what my priest says.
Okay. Let me know. I'll send you some lectures. I got some good lectures and they outline the tenets of the faith.
Very lazy.
All you have to do is listen. You just put them on and listen.
Yeah. I'm just hedging my bets here. I don't know if I could actually be spiritual. See, I'm like the only person on earth I know is like, I'm religious, but not spiritual. Like most people say the exact opposite. I'm like, I definitely want to be part of the church. I'll go to mass. Like, give me the checklist. I'll do all those things. Squeak by. I'm probably going to be like the cleaning lady if I get into heaven, which is totally fine with me. But I'm not knocking the ball, the cover off the ball.
I'll tell you what, I believed in the philosophy of Christianity before I believed in God. And I know it doesn't happen that way for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, that's how I am. Yeah.
Sometimes you come to the philosophy first and then the belief of God follows afterward.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We're gonna get you saved for
I'll be praying.
What are you talking about? I'm the original church. I'm just looking for an out because I'm pissed at them. But it's the original church, man. On this road. No, you have an argument that yours is the original church and we are the schism. I think that's reasonable.
So what did it? Yeah, we were together at one point. Both are the original church, and then we split. Yeah, he's a Protestant, so we have a lot of fun arguments.
You got no argument there. No argument.
Yeah.
No argument.
I don't argue that the Catholics are not the original church and that the Orthodox are. We were both together at one point for the original church, and then we split off. We're both the original.
Yeah, that's church. Fine. But he says I'm not saved. That's Protestant talk.
No, Cam's cool. He's cool.
No, you can't be saying that. So that's
technically we all split off. We're all a part of the original church. Get out of here. The Catholic means universal.
Of indoctrination. I really can't. I cannot. I literally could not switch to a church that wasn't considered. Like I cannot do it. Like I could not mentally. Like it's too deep in the whatever the
wire.
I don't know what it is. Like when they get you, like the minute you're born. Did I ever tell you this? We always go over, but I'll tell you about this last story. So when I was born, I'm the youngest of 9, and it was like a totally catastrophic event, not because I was born, but because of the manner of the birth. And when the doctor came to say, like, this is very serious, my dad said, save the baby. Mm-hmm. And when we both survived, my mother was like, of course you have to, because I was baptized and she wasn't. So like since the minute, like there is absolutely no question. Like I don't even think I have the right to squander that kind of a decision. So anyway, so that you just can't get away from that kind of indoctrination, whether it's right or wrong. But I think it's right, because there's absolutely no way I'm facing the rest of this life, which I'm basically now living for the next one, without without sticking to that gun. Anyway, that's just me.
So
that's just me. I'll probably get a bunch of letters, not just from the priest, but from other people who think I'm absolutely idiotic for thinking there's any purpose to any of it, but whatever.
Who writes letters anymore?
Well, emails.
Throw them away.
They're
Yeah,
letter-sized emails. Trust me. Most of them aren't, but on stuff like this, that's why I hate to go near anything like this or the Civil War. The Bible, Church, or the Civil War. It's like, obviously, you spent a lifetime reading about this, and I definitely didn't. Just hedging my bets, making my bone broth, going to church. Making my bone broth, going to church. Like, that's all. That's my Sunday. I'm doing my best.
It's all you can do. And if I get a message longer than a tweet, I go, I'm not going to read that. And then I ignore it. So just take
well, that would free up a lot of time of mine. But my community's all I got. I live in LA.
So you read the first 280 characters and then you dismiss the rest.
Yeah, I read every what patrons send me. I read everything.
Oh,
it's
you're
nice.
Sweet.
They're nice. Yeah. They're smart. Yeah, it's good. I like it.
To our patrons, I'm not going to do that. So make your point in 280 characters or do not send it to me. Thank you.
But if you send me a message, I will send it to her and it'll come from me.
Send them to Monica. She'll read them.
Yes.
Just summarize them, send them.
I can't do all the tweets anymore. Up until recently, I did every single tweet I got. Every single tweet. I have 15,000 followers. Every single tweet.
I don't even do that.
But I can't do it anymore. I can't.
Have you met these people? Have you met the people who follow me?
I've met a lot of them. They're what? They're monsters? Oh no, yeah. Well, I got good at not eliciting the mean stuff. I just you can really get good at not saying stuff that trigger people. Like I could go for the longest time. Every once in a while, I mess up and then I got to deal with that. But rarely, rarely. Anyway, but I really loved that. But now life is too hectic. I can't.
I feel that.
I'll be back.
We'll wrap this up. But let me, the hope question, very simply, what's something in your personal life right now that gives you hope that you think might be worth sharing with our audience? Because we find hope in the little things, not just the big things. It's me, isn't it?
Well, I mean, how little can it be?
It can be personal. It can be global. It's just whatever.
Very, very little.
That's okay.
I think I found someone who will walk my son who has Down syndrome, teach him to walk to school and back every day, which I don't have the time to do because I have to drive my other kids. And he just needs to learn these things. And boy, it takes forever. And it's very hard to find somebody you can trust. He's going to be safe. And it made me very all day after all this, finally finding someone I think is going to, help that kid take another step.
I think that's a wonderful answer, Monica.
And so, with that, thank you for coming on our show again. If you want to find Monica and me sometimes, you can find her. If you want to check out the website, it's thepropreport.com. She's on all the podcatchers. They have a Patreon, patreon.com/propaganda report. Or is there a "the" in there? Okay.
No, just propaganda. And same thing for Rockfin.
Yep. And we're on Rockfin as well. You can use our link, her link, no matter what. Just watch both of our shows. We both get a kickback. We both get to keep this thing going.
But you have to tell people that you're filling in on the Drive Time News Blast this week, our daily show of the news. So I know, Jessica, I hope that someday you can fill in for Cam if Cam can't fill in for us. So I have to just go down the line, but hopefully that Brad will be back soon. And then we can take a rain check on this.
Binkley.
Both of us.
I hope Binks, if you're out there listening, I hope you feel better soon, bud.
And other than that, you can find her on Twitter at Monica Perez Show. And I think that's it. So I will let you go. Do you need
tell us your stuff because I'm going to put this in my feed.
Okay. Well, I can go ahead and do that. Usually I'll kick people off so they don't have to deal with it, but I will do it just for you. First off, let's talk about the episodes coming up. We're entering spooky season, and October is going to be great. So we actually have
so excited.
The next 4 weeks are going to be interesting. Odd Man from The Odd Man Out. He's coming next week, and we're going to be talking about what was his name? Jim Jones and the ritual mass suicide at Jonestown in Guyana. Then after that, we're going to have Kate Sherrill back. She runs a little project called Burials and Beyond. We had her on one time to talk about death, and this time we're going to be talking about Gothic spiritualism. So that'll be a lot of fun. Following that, we have my favorite true crime podcaster, Jack Luna from the Dark Topic. We're gonna talk about dark topics and his history, how he tells stories. If you remember in my Red Pills, I think I did it in this, where anytime I said the word quote, I did it like Jack Luna, which he goes, quote. I borrowed that from him because I loved it. And then finally, second week of October, we're going to have Cody Cook and Ryan Burgett's going to come back on the show, and we're going to talk about interdimensional beings. We're going to talk about that.
You're gonna have to
Is
rap,
that me?
Jessica.
Oh no, I don't know how to do the things. Okay, so good thing you mentioned what's coming up.
Yeah, your Twitter stuff.
So, if you want to find me, I'm at SoupCanarchist on Twitter. Cam is at Cam Harless. And you can find us on Odyssey, Rockfin, anywhere basically that podcatchers are sold, and also on YouTube. If you're here listening on YouTube, please hit the subscribe and notification bell. If we get up to 1,000, we can do super chats. So guys, help us get up there. And definitely follow Monica on the Propaganda Report because she's awesome. And I hope everybody had a good time. Cam has a button that he hits to do the exit. I don't have that button. That normally would come up and tell us, like, it was like the outro music and stuff like that. So I don't have that. I'm sorry, guys. You're not going to get the cool outro music, but I love you and please come back again. Bye.
Thanks, Jessica.